We disable the fast forward button. I sell you like a podcast app for a podcast. It's exactly like the Apple Podcast app, except there's no fast forward button. You have to sit there and listen to every single ad.
Hello, friends. Welcome to User Friendly, episode 80. Did you know that?
Whoa! I didn't.
Episode 80. My name is Roberto Hoyos. I am the creator of Throwboy. I'm here with my friend
Erfan Elijah. I'm the creator of the Cultcast podcast.
Uh-huh.
Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. If not, it's about Apple. You should go check it out. It's on iTunes.
Thanks for watching the show. I'm like so offbeat today. We're actually streaming live.
We're streaming live.
And so I'm doing like multiple
Women
things.
smoking shrooms.
Yeah.
Which is the new cool way to do that.
And so yeah, User Friendly is a show that talks about tech and
Our favorite stuff on the web.
Stuff on the web.
And all things web
and
geek.
all things geek. And I think we need to change that because I hate saying all things geek.
I was thinking that same thing actually before we even started talking about this. We needed to change what we said because it's like not even really about that anymore. The show's evolved.
It has, yeah.
Into a monster that's not that.
Maybe
it looks like you're on low right there.
Yeah, it's gonna. My stream's gonna die. I'm sorry if you're watching this. It's really kind of janky, but
yeah,
we're experimenting with live. So yeah, back for another round of User Friendly.
Indeed, we are.
How was your week?
I had a great week. Let's see, what did I do? I went clothes shopping.
That's good.
That's cool.
I need to do that.
You know how when you start getting rid of clothes because they just get old, right?
And then you have nothing to wear.
And then you have nothing to wear, and then you start going clothes shopping, and you really just can't find anything else.
Yeah.
It sucks, and I see guys walking around with giant, like, American Eagle logos on their shirts and stuff.
I know,
I don't like wearing logos.
Yeah, unless it's mine.
Unless they're boutique or something that is something that I actually really like.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's so 1990s when I see somebody walking around with a giant, like, Abercrombie logo on their clothes.
That's like high school for us. Yeah, that's really old.
But I see people doing that. Of course, the style here in Seattle is so mega hipster now.
Uh-huh.
I was at this pho restaurant yesterday, and these two super emo / vintage / hipster girls come in.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I like it so far.
Okay, well, you're going to love this. I'm not sure one of them was a girl.
Okay, never mind.
Because I saw she walk in, and I was like, I'm not sure if that's a girl or a guy. And then as I was walking out, I kind of glanced down, and she had a giant bush of armpit hair. And then I was super confused. I'm like, you're either very Parisian / avant-garde, or you really are a dude in a dress.
She had the sweetest Adam's apple.
Yeah, she's like, oh, this pho is delicious.
I'm
not sure. I'm not even sure why I took it there.
It's like
that's how my week was.
Well, I had a great week too. So.
Yeah, I also saw transvestites.
Yeah. I went to the Capitol Hill block.
I saw
party.
that.
So speaking of like the hipster nation here in Seattle.
Yeah.
That's really fun though.
Was this your first time?
No, I've been this is my third time. But it's this big party in like kind of the hip district here in Seattle, and they block off all the streets.
Is it a pretty big area? I've actually never been.
Like they have like 6 stages, and some of the stages are inside of the clubs that are on those streets. Mm-hmm. So it's really fun, and then you just walk in and out of bars and like get drinks and then go walk around and see other shows and stuff. All the bands are just random names I've never heard of. You know, like it's like that Jimmy Kimmel
a lot
skit.
of people.
Did you see that?
Gosh, dude, look at this. That's crazy.
Yeah,
he's so popular.
Don't be jealous.
No, I'm not. I actually like him. I'm just surprised he got that much feedback right away. I've actually never been, but I hear people complaining about the fact that it's not like it used to be.
I don't really know what that means because I've been since 2008.
Uh-huh.
I went like 2008, 2010, and now, and it's just crowded. I mean, like, what do you want? It's like...
Well, people were saying, oh, the bands used to be so much better, but I feel like people say that no matter what concert you're talking about.
Yeah, but dude...
Lollapalooza, I mean, all that stuff.
It's different now because... I mean, every time, and this is like you said, like any show, you'll go and you'll like not recognize any of these bands, but then like 2 years later, they're like the biggest bands, you know, some of the biggest bands were there.
Yeah, that's true. Uh-huh.
So it was fun though. Like if judging just based off the music, there was good music, so I had a good time.
How much does it cost?
$40 for a day.
Wow, for one day.
Yeah.
Wow.
But my friend was visiting, so we went and did that. But actually, you can watch my vlog of that if you go to youtube.com/throwboypillows. I've been vlogging every other day, so check that out.
That was awesome. So you had a good time then?
Yeah, it was cool.
That's fantastic.
So let's get into the shoe.
Wow, some of these... Sorry, I'm looking at our first topic, actually.
Yeah, you are.
So iTunes has hit 1 billion podcast subscriptions. I actually thought this was episodes.
I thought it was downloads.
I thought it was downloads as well. So this is 1 billion subscriptions. So, man...
What is our percentage of that?
I don't know. How many zeros can I put after a decimal point? We might be here for a while. You know, the thing about podcasts is it's just so subjective. You know, some of these that I listen to are great. And then I listen to some that are incredibly popular.
And they're not good.
And they're terrible.
Yeah.
At least I think they're terrible. Obviously, there are people out there that really love them.
I think especially the tech ones, it's like, tech is sort of a weird audience because, well, first of all, they're the ones that kind of spurred podcasting in the first place. Because all the biggest podcasts when it started were tech, right? Mm-hmm. They were like all tech and then like NPR. They were like progressive enough to figure out that they should probably do something with this, right? But tech is weird because sometimes people like kind of like a lighthearted version of it, sort of like what we do. And then some people like a very analytical, dry version of it, right?
Yeah.
And I can't stand those. Like
I can't either.
I'm like pressing play and I'm like, dead air. Is the show going?
There's this one which I shan't name.
So monotone, it's like worse than NPR monotone. Like
NPR's monotone, but I find NPR at least narrative to a point where it's entertaining.
Well, you're actually like absorbing it, right?
Yeah.
Some of these people are just not meant for the radio or anything, right?
I guess that's all subjective.
Calling you out.
There's this one which I shan't name, which is very popular, especially in our area, Seattle. And the person who does this podcast, smart guy. I think he's good at what he does, and one of my friends is really into this podcast. Mm-hmm. He does this for a living. Makes, I'm going to bring back a 90s term, a grip of money doing this. And I've tried to listen to this podcast probably 5 times now. And unlike our show, where at least we have some kind of direction, we're talking about tech and things that kind of evolve, or I say revolve around technology.
The internet stuff.
His is just whatever they want to talk about. It's like, hey, I went to a bar this weekend. And they talk about that for 2 or 3 hours.
I'm not a fan. I've said this on our show. I'm not a fan of these just shoot the breeze shows.
Yeah.
I'm really
like them to have a little bit of direction.
Yeah, and I mean, this honestly could go to pretty much any celebrity that I might be a big fan of. I don't want to know. I don't want to just hear you guys talk because I feel like it's kind of a lazy version of content, you know?
Oh, it's the laziest version, right? You just get together, you come up with a thing before the show.
No, you don't have to come up with anything.
Yeah, right? You just sit down and start talking. Some people are better conversationalists than others, so I think it maybe works for them.
Yeah, but I don't really like desire to go into a bar and just like sit by somebody's booth and listen to their conversation because that's pretty much what you're getting, right?
Yeah, that's true. But there are I kind of feel like there are 2 types of podcasts. There are, at least that I listen to, there are the kinds where you learn something, so they're informational in some way.
Yeah.
And then there are the kinds where they're not topical at all. It's just you like those people and you want to hang out with them. I think that's one of the reasons why Johnny Carson's show was so popular.
But at least that had structure and it had like variety, you know, it had entertainment on it and it had guests on it that you cared about. There's a big difference between that, like a variety show, and just this is Joe and Tom and you just like us because we talk, you know?
Yeah, because we're here every day.
Yeah, because we're here. And it's like, there's no topic. Like, I listen to one show that borders on, we kind of talk about anything, but at least they actually do really good discussions about movies and games. So, like, that's one ththing that I actually like about it. RoboBoots podcast, by the way.
RoboBoots?
Yeah.
I think I've heard about that. So, we were going to talk about some of our favorite podcasts and maybe what got us into listening to podcasts.
I'm not finished ranting.
Okay, continue. Continue with your rant, please.
Okay, I'm done.
Just make sure it's technology oriented.
So 1 billion marked just recently, like this last week, I think. That's pretty crazy. And we thought that it would be cool, like you said, to recount how did we even hear about podcasting, right? Because I remember when I heard about it and how I kind of remember how I learned about it. But it's a pretty new invention, and it's kind of like it's spread though because it used to be super nerdy and it was like hard to get them, right? Mm-hmm. So if memory serves, I think that in 2004, let's see, was it 2004 or maybe 3? Apple put out podcasting on as a feature inside of iTunes, and Steve Jobs did a keynote where he was like, "This is going to be like the new thing. People have described this as TiVo for radio because you can download the episodes at your leisure when you want to." That was a pretty new thing. And then also, so he said it was like Wayne's World for radio. So it was like any amateur can start their own show for very little money. And
you said this was 2004?
It was like 2004, maybe 2003.
That sounds about right.
Right? And so, anyway, I remember that keynote and that. Before that, though, I started hearing rumblings of this podcasting thing. I remember I was living in LA, and I was driving, and I heard NPR go, "And check out our podcast on NPR, blah, blah, blah.org." And I was
Whoa, they were that first?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that.
I was like, what is that? I guess, you can download what I just heard, So, and prior to this, NPR did have iTunes content, but it was all under audiobooks, like Terry Gross's Fresh Air and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I would have to pay to listen to those things, right?
Yes.
So this is still sort of murky area, like beginnings of spoken content being distributed widely, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but it was really cool though in the beginning where it was like you had your iPod and it was really marketed as a music device, super marketed as a music device. But then I like to listen to audiobooks. But then this other thing came around where it's like almost like you have a radio now. You almost have this like TiVo for radio is like what he said. And so I got really excited. I started downloading all sorts of stuff. But I think the first thing that I downloaded, probably the first thing, and I don't even think I downloaded it on iTunes. I think I found it on their website, was Twit. So Leo Laporte's Twit show.
That's crazy.
And that was
going so long.
It was so ghetto back then, right?
And that was audio only at that point.
Yeah, and I barely remember how I even stumbled onto it. I think my brother told me because we were Tech TV fans, like of his old network that he was on, and I downloaded one of his shows, and it was really ghetto, and he was using a lot of the old music that they used on Tech TV. So it was like it was like super bootleg, right?
Wow.
No sponsors, none of that stuff. You can listen to these old shows, but it was interesting just like hearing these people that I'd heard on TV, and all of a sudden I'm hearing them in this more intimate way. Like it's just like just in your ears, and it's very intimate, and it sounds like you're just listening to these guys talk about the stuff that they normally would talk about, but unedited, uncensored. Like it was just different,
that's a good point. Is it really is very kind of unstructured, even though it's topical, but it's not edited together.
Right.
You would think a lot of these podcasts aren't. So it is. It's very different than the kind of radio style that you would have heard before that, especially television.
It was different, but then I think some of them took their cues from old time radio. Like Leo started to do spoken ads instead of like, we're going to cut to commercial and then it goes to like a song or whatever, like an ad. Mm-hmm. Right. He actually says them inside of the show, which a lot of people do now, right? A lot of people will just, like your show, you just say the ad through. You do an ad read, right? And the ad read goes back to old time radio when they would.
What do you mean where they have copy and they just read it? Yeah, I'd never do that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same, right? Because it would be like, in old time radio, they would do the radio like the Lone Ranger, but then and now we're gonna take a break to talk about Winston cigarettes.
And now to my sponsors, Winston cigarettes,
right.
Doctor recommended.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like that because you're still the same person you're talking. It's not cutting away to a commercial ad, like
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was interesting. It was like all kind of new territory, and that's kind of how I learned about it. What about you?
Well, you were definitely into it well before I was. I didn't even get an iPod until probably mid 2005.
Okay.
And I used it for music. Actually, maybe later than that. Only I did not use iTunes really all that much. I would just rip music and then put MP3s on my iPod. Mm-hmm. I don't even think I understood what podcasting meant until probably 2008, maybe 2009.
Wow, that's like really recent.
Yeah, for sure. When I got into Mite Tees, which is the clothing company I started, I probably started listening to podcasts then. And to be honest, I'm not even really sure how I got into it. I cannot recall at all. ever like hearing about a particular podcast. I think it was through Kevin Rose.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to like send like t-shirts to like different like tech personalities and stuff.
Yeah.
Just to kind of like promote the brand and let them know that we were out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think through that process, I got into what Kevin Rose was doing, probably Dignation.
Yeah.
Although I don't think I listened to Dignation first. I think I might have listened to Totally Rad Show first.
Interesting.
I don't really know the order it went, but that's when I really started getting into podcasts. And then I got a TiVo.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing about the TiVo is it goes out. It's kind of like a Roku in that it will go out and retrieve stuff for you. I guess the Roku doesn't have a hard drive, does it? It's
No.
just for streaming.
No.
Well, the cool thing about the TiVo is you'll tell it what podcast you like, and it will go grab them and then just store them on your TiVo, so that when you want to listen to them or watch them, they're just sitting there ready for you.
That's
So
cool.
kind of like how your iPhone works now, where you could set it to do that. Because on an iPod, you had to go out, boot up iTunes, right?
Right.
Download the podcast,
Yeah,
and then sync it.
Yeah.
And for me, that was just too much work, apparently.
It always felt very like hacked together, because I mean, really, it really was somebody recording audio on an audio program on their computer, putting it on the internet, and then somebody else would download it and put it on their MP3 player. Like, it's really caveman, right? It's super like not. It's like it's inventive because no one was doing it. But actually, I take that back. A real podcast actually has to have an RSS feed. But some people would be like, in the early days, be like, check out my podcast, and it would just be like a downloadable MP3 on their site, But that doesn't do anything. It doesn't. What do you call it? You can't subscribe to it, right?
You just have to go get it.
Right, because that was probably the biggest invention, and that was a Tim Curry. What's his name? Adam Curry invention was the RSS feed. Putting that into, I don't know how it works, but basically putting the RSS feed into the audio download, so that when you hit a subscribe type button, it would actually update when there was new episodes, right? That was cool. I mean, that was like...
Man, it's been working like that forever, too.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it works now, and that's how it works on our mobile and everything like that. We just don't
Right.
think about it as much, but back then it was like... kind of a cool thing, because you're like, oh, you can click and set it and forget it, and now anytime there's a new thing, there you are. Right?
We just made it up right now. Set it and forget it. I love the Totally Rad Show. That was some kind of magic they had. And, we've talked about it before. We had Jeff Kanata from Totally Rad Show on the Cult Cast, which was great. A lot of our listeners didn't know who he was, which is unfortunate. And some people complained. They're like, "What is this guy doing on your show? He doesn't even know anything about Apple." And I guess for me, I was like, well, he knows enough, A, and B, he had a really excellent show, and I thought maybe more people would know who he was. So because I thoroughly enjoyed myself on that show. I had a grand old time, and Jeff was very conversational, and so I would love to actually have him on again. But that was really the podcast that really put me onto the whole podcast thing.
Yeah.
Is Totally Rad Show. Video games, movies, they would play games with each other. And they had these fantastic backgrounds that were user submitted. So like you see the user submitted artwork that I asked for Cult Cast. Like a lot of ideas that I have kind of are derivatives of things that they did on that show, which were totally avant-garde. I mean, there was just no one else doing those things at the time. Especially they would shoot in front of a green screen, and then they would add the background in, which allowed them to create these amazing virtual sets that were rich in detail and really funny, because their editor, Mike Gaines, was just incredible. I mean, he was incredible. He was one of the best editors of any podcast out there, which may sound silly to think about, but an editor adds a lot to a movie, to a television show. I mean, they kind of take all this raw footage and sew it together into this thing that you like to watch all the way through. It's a really important job.
He was like a fourth member of that.
He really was the fourth member of that show. I mean, the unseen member. You would see his work, but never his face. So, and then from there, I started subscribing to all sorts of podcasts. Did you want to talk about maybe some of the ones we listen to now?
Sure. I think, so it wasn't until I started Throwboy in 2007, 2008-ish, that I started to get into video podcasts, right? So before that, it was just a different ballgame. And nowadays, it seems like if you have a podcast, you do audio and video most of the time. I mean, some people don't. So I started getting into Dignation, I kind of didn't think I would like it at first, and then
That's exactly how I felt. I was like, Dignation. I just thought the name was bad.
I was just kind of like, oh, I know, I remember Kevin Rose. He was on Tech TV.
The
whatever.
Dark Tipper.
But it was very, very different because on I think a lot of people agree if they watched Kevin Rose on the Screensavers and all that, he was very like, I don't know, milk toast. Like he was just very kind of like, oh, he's just like I don't know, nothing special about him. He's just like this guy.
Really?
You know? Yeah. I mean,
that's interesting to hear.
But on Dignation, he was, cursing and drinking beer and all this stuff, and he just felt like, oh, that's just like your buddy. That's cool.
Right.
That changed the perception for me, and I think a lot of people of this guy is cool, and you can hang out with them, and they tell dirty jokes, and this is cool. Like that was totally different. And I think maybe some people like that about our show because we're just a little bit more like regular,
Yeah,
and
super raw.
That was the one thing I really loved about that show. I was like, this is so cool. I totally feel like I'm just hanging out with these guys, and we get that comment a lot, which is our favorite comment, by the way.
Yeah, right.
So I got into that, and then but fast forward to now, I really started to loving the How Did This Get Made podcast with Paul Scheer. That's really funny. Basically, they talk about some movie that's just like a notoriously terrible movie, and then they kind of go through it scene by scene or like bit by bit, and it's actually super funny. And all the hosts are into film. Like they're either actors. Actually, I think they're all actors. So they know all the terminology and like what actually would be good about film and stuff like that. So it's funny. I listen to the Cult Cast. Not trying to plug, but I actually do listen to that. I just want to see real quick.
Cool, thank you. Every download counts.
And
I should probably open up mine too.
I listen to... Oh, this is another really funny show. I listened to this show by the guys from College Humor, Jake and Amir.
Yeah. Oh, are they from College Humor?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Jake and Amir started their own podcast called If I Were You.
Yeah.
It's an advice podcast. So they get
Really?
emails of people asking them.
I actually just subscribed to that one, but I haven't listened to it yet.
It's really funny. I mean, they're really good at playing off each other and being really funny, and that's their job. Like, they're comedy writers, right?
Right.
So I recommend that one. I love that one. That comes out on Monday. And one that I actually really started to like recently on the Twit network is called This Week in YouTube, and it's two YouTubers talking about just what's going on in YouTube, what the hot new video is.
So you like that show?
It got way better.
Wow. Because Leo Laporte's not on it?
Yeah. I don't mean to say anything bad.
No, that would be like This Week in Skateboarding with Leo Laporte. It just doesn't make any sense to have him on there.
And I mean, I think they kind of sense that, but now since they're both into YouTube, and I'm getting more into my YouTube channel, so I go on there and I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. That's a really great tip. I should use that, and oh, that's how CPMs work or whatever, right? They get kind of like in depth with it rather than just it being a service level. This is what's funny on YouTube. It's a dog skateboarding. It's like it's actually like helpful for.
It's more like the business of YouTubing.
It's both, right? Okay. So if you actually are a YouTuber or want to be one, it gives you a lot of great tips for that. And then lastly, I'll say one more. I love the Robo Boots podcast.
I want to subscribe to that. I've never even heard of that one.
These guys are just up in Canada. They're two guys that talk about games and about movies. They just did a really good recap of all of the Comic-Con movies that came out.
Oh, really?
And they're big film buffs, so they're really good at kind of diving into this kind of stuff. And but more notably, the thing that they're doing now is a Let's Play channel on YouTube called Super Robo Play. Mm-hmm. It's just youtube.com/Super Robo Play, where they play video games and you hear their voices over it and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I definitely want to add old episodes. I want to hear. So, which one was the episode where they did like
that new one, the Comic-Con?
Yeah, that's the new one, Man of Steel cast. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So, the one I just started getting into is called the Matt Cast. Have you heard of it?
I've seen that logo for ages. Yeah,
I have too. So this guy named Adam Christensen does the Matt Cast. I actually met Adam at Macworld this year, and I had never listened to his podcast. I saw it in the charts, and I decided to listen to it. Fantastic podcast. This guy knows his stuff, and he dives in really deep into a lot of different Apple-type topics. It's just him, so it's just him talking. So it's kind of interesting, and they're long, too, usually like an hour and a half somewhere around there.
I should check that out. That sounds good.
He's going to be on the Cultcast next week.
Oh, good.
So he's going to be coming on just to kind of hang out. We're going to talk Apple. I'm really excited to have him on because I was kind of blown away when I listened to this. He is really insightful, talks about things in a way that he articulates himself in a way that few people do when it comes to Apple stuff. So it's going to be really cool to have him on. Another one, if you play video games, a podcast I love is IGN's Podcast Unlocked. It's kind of a Xbox-based podcast, so if you're a PlayStation gamer, you may not like it as much, but love the personalities on that one. That's one of those shows where it's informative because they talk about what they're writing about. It's all writers for IGN, but I just like the guys on there. You know, like they sound like they're having a fun time. They have an actual studio where they record. Oh, how I would love to have one of those, man. The dynamic of having people together in a room is so great. Doing it over Skype is fine, but having someone there with you is just so much better, I think. You know, one I listen to a lot is actually called the Dave Ramsey Show podcast, which is just basically like how to spend your money and how to save your money.
I think you told me about that.
I listen to this podcast a lot. I've learned a lot from it. Just how to not be an idiot with your money. And I've got a ton of money, so it's like I really have to figure out how I'm going to do things.
I should try that one.
I really tried listening to How Did This Get Made, the one that you really liked, and I could not get into it for whatever reason.
You know what helped me? Because it's very like it's one of those things where you listen and you don't get you don't know these people yet, so it's hard to just dive into it, right? And you don't really know like why it should be funny.
Yeah.
I started with a movie that I knew was horrid, right? So I started with that, and I was like, oh, this.
Are you supposed to watch the movie first?
They encourage you to.
And do they tell you what it's going to be before you listen to the podcast?
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So,
but anyway, what was I going to...
Okay.
Oh, yeah, what was the money one called?
The Dave Ramsey Show podcast. You can also actually listen to this. So, the podcast is like 30 minutes or 40 minutes. If you download the iHeartRadio app, he has his own channel, and they rebroadcast the day prior show on a loop. So, he has a 3-hour show every day, and you can just listen to it over and over and over and over again. That's actually usually what I do.
Is this wrong? Why is there only one?
Because he only makes one available at a time.
Oh, okay.
And then he takes it off.
Oh, okay.
I think because he's nationally syndicated.
Oh,
so he wants to make sure that you're listening to the radio. But
Yeah.
iHeartRadio, great way to go. 2 more quick ones. Radiolab, obviously. I've talked about Radiolab in the past.
What's that?
You've never listened to Radiolab? Radiolab is probably the best podcast on iTunes. It's storytelling at its finest. It's this guy named Jad Abumrad. He used to be a musician and a composer, and now he does this podcast where they tell stories from our culture and even other cultures, and they narrate them really well. And then also they build in all these incredible sound effects to enrich the storytelling. And I mean, I get goosebumps from listening to this show. It's like old-timey radio where they're like doing radio effects and stuff, and it transcends audio. It takes you into another world. And I know that sounds like hyperbole. It's not. It's an incredible, magical, revolutionary podcast that's insanely great.
And one more thing.
It's free.
What's your last one?
Oh, and the very last one is The Nerdist. Now, Chris Hardwick is like everywhere these days.
I've never given that one a shot. I just feel like I don't know. I don't know what his authority is to be like Mr. Geek.
Yes, I see your point.
It's kind of like Ryan Seacrest making a geek podcast because geek is the new cool.
Geek is the new cool. The reason
is he good? I mean, I don't know.
The reason I like this podcast is because he gets A-list celebrities on here. So he had Joss Whedon. I haven't listened to that one. He had Jeff Bridges recently. That's cool. Charlie Day. Aren't you a big fan of his?
I don't know who that is.
Oh, never mind. He had one with Billy Crystal, which I haven't listened. Rick Moranis. Who has Rick Moranis on a podcast? Yeah. Wow. Spaceballs fame.
So you like the guests?
I like the guests. That's what I like about it the most.
Is that always how the show was?
I haven't listened to a lot of it. I kind of cherry pick on this podcast. If I see an episode that's good, I'll listen to it. I listened to the Macklemore one, which was good. Steve Carell one was great. So that's more why I listen to it, because you get these celebrities in a really intimate environment where they're just talking to Chris. And is he the absolute best podcast host in the world? He's not Jad Abumrad, but he does
Ira
have
Glass.
He's not Ira Glass. But he does have amazing guests on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, podcasts are so personal and intimate. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. It's even hard for, like, if we got in the car and I put on a podcast that you never heard, I kind of feel uncomfortable that you're listening to it because you probably don't get.
Because I'm going to judge you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not even that. You just don't really understand why do I like this, you know? And it's like you have to be in that space where you're willing to just try a new something, right?
Yeah.
Because if somebody's telling you, go try this, it's going to be the best, you probably won't, you know? At least that's how I am.
And some of these podcasts are like coming in on chapter 5 of a book.
Big time, yeah.
Because there is, like Cultcast, we have so many jokes now that go back an entire year that if you had just come in, you might kind of be turned off by the fact that we're making Tim Cook sing Barbie Girl and he's driving books and we're doing bad accents, driving cars. And some of these podcasts are like that. These guys have been doing these things for so long that you really have to commit to giving them 4 or 5 episodes before you make a decision on whether you like them or not.
And it's almost like you have to have chemistry with them, oddly enough, right?
You do. Yes, they have to be someone that you like. I think that's very important.
Because you feel like they're just in your ears, basically, right? Or, So you feel like you're part of the group listening. So if their type of humor or their banter is not appealing to you, you just basically got to move on.
Yeah, I think I have said this before, maybe not on this show, but I think a big part of it is, do those people like each other?
Oh, yeah.
How much do they like each other? How well do they get along? For the Cultcast, one of the reasons I was so excited to do that podcast is because Leander and I've always felt, have a very good chemistry together. Buster kind of came on after Leander and I had talked about doing this podcast for like 6 or 7 months for those who listen. Alex was way down the road. I mean, I didn't even know Alex for almost 8 months after we had started the show. And when he came on, that was one of the first times I'd ever talked to him.
Oh, that's funny.
So, but Leander and I mean, when we have the Gov on, the whole show gets better because we get along so great. We laugh a lot, and he's so much fun. It just makes the show better. So that's actually, during the summer times when he takes off for the whole summer,
I cry every morning.
It really is a bummer for me because I enjoy doing that show with him every week, and he really enjoys it too. So I'm really looking forward to him coming back and freaking not hanging out with his family for 2.5 months.
You're gonna be that guy in like a couple years.
What a jerk. He's got like 12 kids.
Yeah.
He travels every summer for 2 months. Who does that?
All of his Facebook pictures are just his kids.
Yes.
His Facebook profile is his kid.
Yeah, right. Oh. People that do that, don't do that, people. Don't do that. It's like when you're on Facebook and you see someone and they have a picture of their baby with like a booger hanging out of their nose.
And that's their profile.
And that's their profile. I understand that you love your kid, but I don't have my dog Penny as my profile picture. I love my dog Penny, but it's my profile.
It's like, I had a wild night last night and it's a baby face.
Yeah. Oh, big wild night. Poop in my diaper. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Anyway.
Should we continue on other topics?
Yep.
Let's do this.
Tweet at us what your first podcast download was.
Yeah, if you listen to any other ones. I love people tell us that they listen to Cultcast and User Friendly. I think Cultcast got a lot of people from Cultimac listening to podcasts for the first time.
That's cool.
Because a lot of them have told me like, oh, I don't even listen to podcasts. I'm just listening to this show. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool that...
I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry this is your first and last impression.
Yeah.
Sorry to see you go.
Wasn't there something before this thing?
Yeah, I think we should only do one of these, honestly. Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
So let's see who tweeted this at us. This was Andreas Lostromos. Gosh, I like to say that. It's
Did
like
he tweet us
full of
before?
S's.
Oh, never mind.
I think so. So thank you, Andreas. He suggested this Kickstarter called the Lomography Petsval Portrait Lens. Neither of us have seen this. This is going to be our first time watching this.
But we love these Kickstarters.
So let's just play this video.
In the 19th century, the vast majority of photos were shot with the now legendary Petzval lens. Photos shot with a Petzval are immediately recognisable for their super sharp centres and wonderful swirly bokeh effect in the background.
Oh.
The distinctive look of these photos is near impossible to achieve using Photoshop and filters. For this Kickstarter project, we are reinventing the Petzval lens for 21st century photographers. It doesn't matter whether you shoot analog or digital, the brand new lomography Petzval portrait lens is designed to work with both Canon EF and Nikon F mount cameras. So why are we bringing the lens back 2 centuries after it was first created?
Move that.
Well, the original Petzval lens was designed in order to work with cameras manufactured in the 19th century. It's extremely hard to find a Petzval lens today which works well with smaller format cameras and produces the same unique effect, and the Petzval lenses you do find are usually defective because of their age. That's why we set ourselves the exciting challenge to produce a brand new Petzval lens for the 21st century. The lenses are crafted from brass, just like the original Petzval lens was, and they look amazing when connected to your SLR camera. Each lens is produced in Russia by Zenit, a company steeped in tradition and famed for their skill in developing high-quality optical equipment. The team at Zenit have redrawn, recalculated and remeasured the original 1840 Petzval lens to make it work with a whole host of modern cameras. In reinventing the Petzval, we have had to re-engineer the optics of the original lens and make them work with modern SLR cameras, while still retaining the effects that have made the original Petzval famous. To give some background to the Petzval story, when the first analog camera was introduced in 1839, it used a lens designed by Charles Chevalier. Chevalier's lens was hugely important, but it did have some problems.
Oh, I think I'm good on this one. You want to keep going?
Of f15.
Yeah, cool.
This
All
meant
right,
that
let's
even
stop
in
it
bright
there.
sunlight, exposures could take 10 minutes.
Wow, I can't believe this thing's raised almost $800,000.
Yeah, it wanted 100,000.
They wanted $100,000. They're almost at 800. Let's see how much does it how much does it cost to actually get one of these lenses? Let's see here.
$300.
Wow.
Well, early birds, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
500. How much is a lens? Like a good one?
Good's really subjective.
Like something you would be like, that's a good one for me.
You could spend, I mean, I'd say you could spend $500 for a fixed focal length lens.
Mm-hmm.
Manual lenses tend to be a lot cheaper than anything with autofocus or anything like that. So yeah, this seems to be.
So what exactly
about
does
right.
it do?
So
Does it make it like really depth of fieldy or what? I don't
well, it
understand.
changes the depth of field. So basically, lenses are kind of known for how sharp they are, and then also there's a word they use called bokeh, which is basically what the quality of the background is, what kind of blur it has, and then what that blur looks like. So this lens, I guess, is special because it has a swirled blur, so it creates a really sharp area right in the center, and then as you go out from that center point, it becomes less and less sharp, and the background behind whoever you're shooting or whatever you're shooting has a swirled bokeh, so it's blurry, but it also has a swirl to it.
Okay.
So we saw that effect in the video. It looks cool. I would never purchase one of these. I mean, photography is one of those things where you have people who are really passionate about new tools like this.
Yeah.
But I feel like the utility of it is very low because you're not going to be running around using this all the time because it has such a distinct look. You could only really use it in particular situations.
For like certain shots.
For certain shots, you're not going to want to use this all the time. Not to mention the fact that this is manual focus, so it's slower to use than an autofocus lens. Some people really love manual focus and only use manual focus. I don't. So basically what they're doing in this project is taking a lens that it seems like people used to love and adapting it for the modern age.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is they also are changing the optics. So they're taking a lens and they're calling their new lens the same thing as the old lens. But when you change the optics of a lens, you're changing the very characteristics that make it unique. So I wonder how this thing is actually going to look once they produce it. If it's going to maintain the quality and the same like bokeh characteristics of a lens that used to exist.
I'm guessing like somewhere in this they show manufacturing because it looks like they have it.
Yeah, they definitely have a prototype.
Yeah.
I'm glad they have a picture of Joseph Petzval. So I want to see a photo taken with this thing. It doesn't really look like they've... So do you see how that looks like it's swirled in the background?
Yeah. That's the main characteristic of this? Here,
Yeah, exactly. So like the center area is very sharp, and then the background and the surrounding areas are blurrier and swirled.
Okay.
So it's definitely a cool effect. It's kind of like a novelty lens. Do you want to have this look in your photos?
Right. It's almost like filters, like actual hard filters, like like what they used to do with cameras before you could do it in Photoshop and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of a similar idea. I cannot believe this has raised almost $800,000.
I mean, I can believe it. It's unique. It
looks vintage.
It looks vintage. It feels that photographer who's going to spend the big bucks, right? It hits that market of people that are going to spend a lot of money for something like this. The pitch was actually quite good. I thought the video was really good.
Yeah, it's very educational.
Yeah. So
it's made out of brass, it looks like.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's high quality too.
Yeah.
But photography is one of those things where people are always looking for, maybe, I don't want to apply this word to this product, but they're always looking for gimmicks. They're always looking for like little shortcuts. They're always looking for gear. Photography is one of those things where there are people who are really into the gear, and it's like musicians, especially like guitar players. They're always looking for like new gear, but they may not actually practice that much.
Yeah.
So they're not actually that great of guitar players.
But they're just gearheads.
But they're gearheads, and they're always looking to buy new gear, and they're always thinking about how this gear is going to make them a better player. When really what they need to do is just practice more.
I used to be like that too.
Yeah, I did too.
I mean, I would still buy. I wouldn't go crazy with buying, but I would lust after gear, and it was just like this is like one of those things that you do.
I totally get it. I was looking at a Martin guitar recently. I have a Taylor, and I like my Taylor, but there's certain things about it I really don't like. And I was like, yeah, I should sell my Taylor and buy a Martin.
Yeah.
But I hardly ever play these days. So I'm like, why am I even thinking about this?
Right. I also think another thing that this speaks to is right now we're living in a time where people are trying to converge digital and analog because analog is attractive to lots of people, like especially like take for example the record or in the record player, right? It's like old enough because I mean records stopped being really kind of widely used in like maybe the early 80s, but it's old enough to be kind of mysterious and interesting to young people, but they can still go down to like a thrift store and get a record player and a record. And people like those tangible things, right? Rather than what they grew up on, which is just MP3s and whatever, right?
Yeah, there's a huge movement towards like analog right now.
So analog is interesting to people, and this kind of old timey stuff is interesting to people. So, but when people converge the two, almost like the Vamp. Remember the amp where you can plug it into old speakers? That's a market right there. People dig that. People think that's cool when you take something that's old and put like, oh, but it actually has Bluetooth now, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Like I can use that with my phone or whatever, right?
I think one of the cool things about analog is that it's very static. You can't change it. You know what I mean? It's like it is what it is.
Yeah.
When you take a film picture, you're going to have a particular look. Your photo's going to look like that. There's no messing with it. It's just that's how it's going to look. And there's a simplicity to that I think is very attractive. At least it is to me. Although I do like messing with stuff digitally. Yeah. So I would never be a film photographer ever.
I was like, wait, what? You always say you would never do.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't mind playing with it, but like if I had to choose between one or the other, it's easy decision.
And there's a lot more work and more discipline I think that goes into analog. Like in the case of speaking of gear that I used to lust after 4 or 8 track reel-to-reel tape recorders that people would use like for recording home audio, right? And those are like these old things. Like people think they're so cool looking now, right? Can you bring up type in TAC, 4 track reel to reel. So, yeah, like that one.
Oh my gosh, my dad used to have one of these very things. In fact, it used to be, I think it was, are these 4 tracks right here?
Yeah.
I think it was 2-track.
Okay, yeah, if it was 2-track, then it's actually not really, it just records one thing. These are, you can record like a drum, bass, vocal.
Are these things
guitar.
expensive?
300, maybe less.
Oh, okay.
Not very much, but people now, like especially young people, think these are so cool looking, and oh my god, if I had this, I could make the coolest recordings. They're actually so much more cumbersome. I mean, that's the thing, is like they're cool, but they're like film. They limit you big time, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You basically can just, you have like a record and a play, basically, is like the extent of what you can do with that thing, and maybe a little bit of adjustments. And what you're putting in is actually what you're going to get out. You can't really tweak it, right? You would have to have another piece of analog.
You mean I have to actually know how to play my instrument?
Yeah.
What if I sing off pitch? We can still change it, right?
But, and then the other big thing about this, and it sort of relates to the film thing, is like, there's a reason why they call them studio engineers. Like, you have to know about things like calibrating machines like this, about all this kind of stuff to actually make a sound come out of it, because they're very technical. And I think that's one of the things that, especially like younger people, were like, oh, that's so cool looking. But actually, if you dive into that, or if you dive into film, you realize there's a lot of steps in between.
Oh my gosh!
It's way different from like what we're used to now, which is very, very, very easy. Where you take out your
super
phone.
Visual too, right?
Yeah,
it's like you boom, look at it, erase if you don't like it.
Right. And this is like, this makes you work for it. But I do like the simplicity of certain things like this. Like I said, you record, and what you get is what you get. I have a very simple film camera that I like to take out sometimes to just take really like, if we got it, we got it. If we didn't, we didn't photos,
Right.
But sometimes you get cool photos from it, so.
That's true. I mean, imagine this, right? So digital photography today, you take a picture, you look at it. If you don't like it, you delete it.
Right.
Back in the day, you would have to have a freaking journal with you. You'd have to number the shot, keep track of the roll film. And then you'd have to be like, okay, on this image, here's what my shutter was set to, here's what my aperture was set to. Mm-hmm. Here's the ISO of the film that I'm using, and then you would send that away, get it developed, or take it somewhere, get it developed, get it back, and then as you're looking through the negatives, oh, I really like what I did with this photo. Where's my journal? Oh, aha!
Yeah.
I used this aperture and this shutter on that. It's like, oh my gosh, it took you like 2 weeks.
Some people love that, though.
Some people love that. I personally never would have gotten into photography if that's the way it would have stayed, because for me, I'm like, it's so much easier to learn aperture and shutter, especially when you can just boom, look, and you can see what you're doing as you're doing it, rather than revisiting your old journal.
It's the same as audio. Some people love the non-visual thing of having a tape record you, right? Because you're not distracted by something that shows you the waveforms as you're recording into the computer, I'm sort of old school. Like, I like not having any visual distractions, because your ears should be the most on thing when you're doing music. Not I'm looking at all of the vocals I'm doing as they come in, But some people like having that feedback, like you just said. You like seeing the immediate feedback of what you just did, right?
With photography, yeah. I couldn't carry that over to music, because I agree with you as far as, when you're recording music, I think you kind of need to be paying attention to what you're doing. Although I feel like that with photography too. Like, it's a great learning tool, but when you're doing photography, there's no time to think about that crap. Like, you need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's people that shoot forever and before they actually get good at it, right?
Yeah, and some of them never do.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I think it also depends on like what you started with, because you are so accustomed to digital, but there's some people that would find that like too easy, or like that's not the way that it should be done, because
it's just they're contrarian, right? They're like, oh, that's how everyone does it, I don't want to do it that way.
That's true, yeah.
Oh,
that's why people buy these reel-to-reels and then get them home and realize they can't use them.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what the heck is this? What is this, tape?
Dude, here's an example of how difficult these are. So I had one pretty much like this, and you have to open up the bottom of it, and then it has all these little knobs that are different frequencies, and you would have to send a frequency through the tape, like record a frequency on the tape, like 1K, 10K, 15K, and then it would be like, boo, And then while it's doing that sound, you'd have to go in with a screwdriver and look at the VU meters and actually make it calibrated. You'd have to do this all the time, or that thing would get uncalibrated, and then your recording wouldn't come out right.
What do you mean your recording wouldn't come out right? Like it wouldn't sound okay?
Well, it wouldn't have enough volume in some cases, or it'd be too loud in some cases. Yeah. This is not like a toy.
I mean, there's a reason
right?
we moved away from this stuff,
yeah.
right?
But there's certain, charm to it. Some people like the way that it sounds. But...
That's true. But I heard Brian Williams say recently about the Johnny Carson show, Late Night with Johnny Carson, that the first 10 years of that show have been deleted forever because somebody accidentally erased the VHS tapes on which they were stored.
I thought they were like in an underground bunker.
They are.
Oh, okay.
All the rest of the film is in an underground bunker in Kansas, I think, or something, in like a salt mine.
Yeah.
But according to him, the first 10 years were just deleted.
Huh.
I mean, because he started a long time ago. When he had a show before the Johnny Carson show, and I forget what that one was called, where he was doing similar things to Late Night with Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
I digress. Anyway, I think we should probably wrap it up there, don't you think?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Let's do it. Okay, cool. Hey, thanks for listening to User Friendly. It's my dog barking in the background. Did you know that you could download all the episodes that we've ever made?
All 80.
All 80 episodes individually recorded for you on VHS tapes.
I deleted them.
But they've all been deleted. So you're going to have to go to iTunes instead, where they're digital. Sorry.
Yeah.
And
we can mail you out some tape.
Yeah. We will put them on a reel-to-reel for you and send them out on a pallet via Pony Express. You can download all of our past episodes on iTunes, and if you like the show, you should subscribe, so that way when we have new episodes, they show up right away. We have video and audio, so choice is yours.
And where can we find you online?
These days, I spend my time either on the Facebook page on Cultcast, facebook.com/thecultcast, or on Twitter, I'm just at Erfon, at ERFON. What about you?
I am at Roberto Hoyos, RobertoHoyos, and I've been making a video every other day. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I upload a video, vlog, and that's on youtube.com/throwawaypillows. It's actually fun. I like doing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How many videos have you made so far?
I'm up to number 7.
I guess it gets up pretty fast when you're doing 3 a week. Wow, that's crazy. Fantastic. We're forgetting something for user-friendly, eh? Oh, yes.
Facebook.com/user-friendly-show.
And did you mention the YouTube?
YouTube.com/user-friendly-show.
There you go. All right. Well, I think that's all we got this week.
Cool.
So let us know your favorite podcasts out there. Tweet at us. And until next time, when we're back with another user-friendly, we're going to see you guys on that next time.
Keep it real to real.